Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast, a podcast in the pursuit of truth and personal renaissance. It's been a while, but I'm super excited to be back. And before I turn this into a monologue, I want to let you know what's coming your way. I had an opportunity to go on my good friend Jonas's podcast with Dane as his co-host, the Barbarian Banter podcast. Pretty full circle moment. I've been friends with Jonas for years, had him on an early episode, but I really enjoyed our conversation. And as I'm diving back into the Vitruvian Podcast, I thought I'd share this really epic conversation with you guys. So without further ado, I'll drop right in and expect more episodes to come soon.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 15 of Barbarian Banter. I'm your host, Jonas Kilker.
And I'm your co-host, Dane Miller-Haas.
Today, we have a very special guest. Our guest is a content creator, entrepreneur, and Renaissance man who has created a personal brand centered around pursuing the truth, cultivating personal excellence in all areas, and being the Renaissance. He is a scholar and an athlete all the same, and I'm very proud to say that he is one of my very good friends. Zach Shankin, welcome to the show.
Jonas, as always, it's a pleasure. And Dane, thank you for having me. I'm super excited about this container and this collaboration. Obviously, Jonas and I have been good friends over the last 3-ish years, maybe more now.
Yeah, like almost 4 years.
It's been really excellent to grow together, watch each other evolve, and obviously both of you guys have caught incredible momentum this year, and I'm loving the growth to watch. It's humbling, and yeah, it's awesome to see other men in the arena rising. So excited for what we have today.
Yeah, that is certainly the most important thing, is the fact that just like the energy that we're all bringing to each other is raising everybody up. You know, like I've been saying probably like every other podcast that we've done since we started, is that the rising tide raises all ships. And like, it's just so evident as all of these sort of opportunities flow back and forth to each other. Like this, for instance, right now, you coming on my podcast, I was one of the like first 10 guests or something on your podcast. And for me, it was the second time I had ever been invited on a podcast, first time by a person that I hadn't personally met. And so for me, that was like such a huge opportunity. I think it was 2021 or I think it was 2022.
Yeah.
But that was like before I had ever started posting on Instagram, TikTok, anything. And some people may know because I've spoken about it a few times, but you are actually the one who convinced me to like start posting, because you visited me one time and you were in the midst of like a 30-day post every single day challenge. I got inspired by that, started doing it myself on TikTok, and then that's basically what led me here, the 30-day challenge. And so I very much have you to thank for that, for sort of pushing me in that direction. I think immediately, like I was always really fascinated by your way that you branded yourself. I always really liked the way that you sort of like portrayed what you stood for, and like your tagline of "Be the Renaissance," I think is something that's like, to some could mean absolutely nothing, but those who get it like recognize the significance of it. And I think especially now in this sort of culture war that we're in, things are shifting all the time. People are having like a resurgence of a desire for knowledge of the past and history, mythology, philosophy, all these things. Like the Renaissance is reoccurring, and that's a theme that keeps coming up. And you were kind of tapped into that before I had sort of like recognized that cultural shift. Do you think that that was something you saw going on, or was that something you wanted to see?
Wow. Incredible compliment. So again, very humbled, but
Of course.
yeah, I think that it was probably a yes and rather than an either or. And I was always, captured by the stories of great men from history, mythology. Like I grew up reading all the great myths, and I was enamored by, men who wanted it all and went for it all. Obviously, Leonardo da Vinci kind of, my brand is derivative of the name of the Vitruvian man. So the Vitruvian being that kind of idyllic, balanced Renaissance man, the circle and the square for those familiar with the iconography. And my journey started however many years ago it was now. And as cringy as it does sound now, like late 22, I graduated from university,
knew that I didn't want to work for somebody else my whole life, but didn't really know what that looked like. So I made an investment into an online course on how to make courses. And, it was kind of this unfolding, you show up and they're like, hey, if you are passionate about something, you can sell it online. And so I made this kind of 12-week self-mastery program. I was passionate about holistic excellence, mind, body, and spirit. And so they were like, well, what are you going to call it? And I was like, well, let me think. And so I looked for things that were public domain, and the Vitruvian was available. And I really think that unfolding, that like kind of 10 months of building out that curriculum and seeing kind of what came through me. And I use that language intentionally. I do feel like that was the first time in my life that I was channeling something creatively, and not in some sort of seanceic sense, but more just like using my luminous creativity.
Of the muse.
Yeah. And it was like so exciting. It was so capturing. I was working at a startup at the time, a medical device startup. So I would go to work from 7 to 5, and in the mornings, evenings, and weekends, I was just obsessed building out this universe. And it really has unfolded a lot. It's funny how, you kind of do the little Campbell's journey and find yourself drifting away from the thing that you started with, because, commerce is difficult, building an online business is difficult. But I'm finding myself returning a lot to like some of the first pieces that I ever wrote around the Vitruvian, and hopefully we'll get a chance to potentially read the manifesto, because I'm still extremely proud of like what that stands for and the words that I use there. And it wasn't even something that, I genuinely look back and I'm like, I don't know how this was like given to me, but it truly was. And so in the sense that there's this cultural movement, I do think that in the collective unconscious, many young men, essentially every young man I find myself interacting with these days, wants and is striving for something similar. Like we all woke up at whatever time and we're entering our young adulthood, having never passed through a rite of passage. Nobody told us when we were a man. We're looking to our fathers or the lack thereof. And it's like, you turn 16. Am I a man now because the state gave me a driver's license? Is it because I turn 18 and I go to college, or I turn 21 and now the state says I can drink alcohol? Like, when do we become men? And so we're kind of lost in our own journey. We're not sheltered by elders that care for us. We're not raised amongst a tribe. And so this feeling that like something is deeply wrong about what I've been pitched and what I've been told and what's going on around me, that's always been there. I've only in recent years been able to more acutely articulate some of the issues that I see, but beyond that, start to diagnose maybe some of the root causes. And that's exciting, right? Because I feel like I'm, a hero placed in this late stage Kali Yuga battlefield. So it's like, me and my guys are, we don't have swords and shields for now. We're armed with laptops and cameras, but being able to discuss ideas and help people walk towards a more higher version of themselves is something that is extremely exciting to me. And every time I can drop like little nuggets, plant seeds of curiosity for somebody to like change their life, as you were saying at the beginning, it doesn't matter which one of us cracks the code, which one of us becomes the billionaire, which one of us really makes that generational push. We don't all have to be Augustus. If we can each play a role in whoever that emergent great man is, I think that we've played our part in the great dance. And, obviously selfishly, you want to be a hero. So
that's the beauty of heroism, is it inspires everyone else who wants to be like the hero. A lot of people, when I talk about heroism, say it's selfish to pursue your own heroic story. And I can see that for some people, but striving for heroism is what lifts other people up, telling people they have potential and they can make change in this world. It seems like a way to drag down people to say never pursue what you're interested in, just kind of debase yourself for others. That seems to me to actually be kind of the selfish thing, almost like the crab bucket mentality, which is a poison in our world, especially right now. And it's great to see guys like you and Jonas that are this kind of, like you said, this kind of collective unconscious. So many guys know something's deeply wrong with this world, and we're all trying to push out of it together. And the more we put our weight behind it, kind of accumulates together. And I think we will cause a rupture within our lifetime.
And it like refocuses the target too, because that's what I think is the most important thing is, like you said, we all feel something's wrong, but we're all kind of attacking it from different angles. And I think being able to see other guys who are in the same fight and like maybe seeing what angles they're coming from and what good they're doing, that helps you kind of refine what you're trying to do. Because I mean, like, I remember, you know, before I ever first started making content, the idea of a content creator or an influencer or something like that, doing something inspiring others, and them saying like, oh, the fact that I get to inspire other people, the change that I've been able to inflict, like, it's been the greatest reward. And I just always kind of thought that was just like for show, that's just like a nice platitude. But then you start actually doing it and you receive these messages from people that are like, yo, I started like trying to make my relationship with my parents better because of you, or I started going back to school to finish my high school diploma because of your videos, or I got really interested in like whatever mythology, and now it's made me want to blah, blah, blah. Like, those are genuinely the coolest message, because you know that the collective unconscious is growing and we're all pushing in the right direction, and the harder and further we push, the more boundaries we're literally going to break. So
yeah, I completely agree. And I'm glad, Dane, that you touched on that idea of, you know, people push and resist against this idea of individuation or, you know, having an ego. Obviously, the modus operandi of evil in our time is constantly inversion and subversion. So it's often, you know, whatever the thing is that is being said, if you flip it upside down, you're close to the truth. And I think that it's a complete psyop, like quieting your ego. What does that even mean? Are you supposed to go take a DMT trip and one-shot yourself with ayahuasca? Like, I think the purpose of a physical experience, like, I don't believe that God makes mistakes. So if I'm born here and like placed on this map at this time, it's like total embodiment of who that avatar is, trying to strive toward the greatest version of that person. That is how you worship the divine. That is how you engage deeply with the grand myth and the individual myth. And there's a quote that comes to mind from Ayn Rand. He talked about like that selfishness aspect, right? Where people will say that you're selfish for chasing your dreams, but the true selfishness is this like ever passive, people pleasing, inauthentic version of yourself. And the quote is from the Fountainhead, and she says, to love someone, to say I love you, you must first know the I. The love of anyone that does not know themselves or is not connected to themselves, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, is the love of a parasite. And, you know, I think the temptation in our time, and this is, you know, whether you have parent wounds or relationship issues, like, we're all kind of banged up through life. But that idea that you want to please everyone around you, if you have a noble heart and you're upright, you want to do the right thing. And you think the right thing is to do what people ask of you necessarily, or to box yourself into this little thing and play small and kind of coax and acquiesce.
Don't bother anybody.
Yeah, like don't ask too many questions. Don't bash into the walls. Don't really shake the status quo. But if any amount of that is not what is calling to your heart internally in your mind and what you see in the world, then you're actually cheating the people that you want to help. You're cheating the people within a relationship if you don't speak your truth. And collectively, if we don't get up on our individual pulpits and say, like, what the fuck is actually going on here? Like, is anybody else seeing how insane this is? And can we start, like, you know, preparing weapons and like preparing for the end? Like,
lest you fall into insanity yourself, thinking that you're the only one.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
This kind of relates to our last episode, Jonas, a little bit. That hasn't released as of time of this recording, but it's about hoplites, Greek warriors, and the phalanx.
Yeah.
Nice.
Each warrior has to be strong, disciplined, courageous himself, because
Trusting
if he
his
isn't,
guys
he compromises all of his comrades, right? So if you can't master yourself, if you can't be the best version of yourself, you're harming anyone that you care about, because you can't help them if you can't even help yourself. It's like, as a kid on the planes, you know, you'd look at the dangly masks, and they would always say, put the mask on yourself before you...
Oh, yeah.
Before my parents would help me, and I was like, why do they put it on first?
Yeah.
But it makes sense, because if you don't, and you pass out trying to get it on someone else, what good are... You're both screwed.
You've cooked us both, yeah.
You do have to be able to take care of yourself and strive for the best for yourself. And that will help you help others. And we can all kind of collectivize that together as a band of men and brothers.
Yeah. And I think, too, to kind of harken back to Zach's point, is that like in the Greek hoplite setting, as soon as one guy turns and starts to run, he admits defeat. The other guy next to him goes, "Fuck, we might be fucked right now," and then he turns to leave too.
And then you see two guys leaving, and you're like,
oh shit, we're all leaving. And it's like the one, I think the coolest statistic that came out of this experiment that they did was that every single time whichever side turned to run they lost 100% of the time, but they experienced like the majority of the casualties, right? And the quicker they turned, the like more casualties they fit. Like it's just a fucking it's all bad all around if you admit defeat from the beginning. So the golden rule there is don't give up. Like stay in the fight for as long as you can. You might die, but you will save as many others as you can possibly, like if you stand and fight. And I think that's kind of the message we need to bring forward is like individually we can do nothing, collectively we can do everything. And we just need to recognize that the collective does exist as much as they try to make it feel like it does not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when you're in fraternity with other guys that are focusing on themselves, you have no option but to rise to that sort of occasion. And it's obviously, the very played out cliche of like, you're the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. But, in lieu of finding those people in your real life, obviously the internet has brought all 3 of us together. It's completely changed the trajectory of my life and my ideological positions. Like I think different things about the universe than I could have ever imagined had I not started saying things on the internet, which is crazy to think about. But so much of our self-esteem as men comes from competency. And so becoming more competent and able to then serve the people around you, that is actually like the secret sauce of what you're likely missing in your life. Everything in our world is so atomized. It's like turn 18 and get booted out of your house for your parents, go pay rent to somebody else, build somebody else's portfolio. And then so you're starting from scratch at 18, no resources. You've left the hometown because the highest paying job is just in some other city for some other corporation that just happened to have the highest bidder. And then you're there, you're paying for your little rent box. And you can feel extremely, extremely alone. You're not in these kind of contiguous tribes where you would normally have shared your upbringing together, have shared lore and experiences that you can bring into the present moment. They saw you at their worst. You both helped each other through hard times. And then now you can carry that into this next season. Like we're in our, young to mid 20s. And like, this is our big swing. God willing, we'll have many, many decades left on our stories. But right now we're extremely young, extremely vital, extremely mentally acute, and we're only improving in all of those aspects. We're gaining material power in the world by becoming more wealthy, and doing it alone is all for naught, because the whole point is like you will get to that place. Doesn't matter how much money, doesn't matter how many girls you sleep with, it doesn't matter what thing you chase. It's going to be you're missing this giant contribution-sized hole, which is that like I'm playing for a team and I'm helping the people around me, and it's through that like peer-to-peer admiration, elder to student admiration, that you fill your cup in filling other people's.
Totally. And I mean, like, as a person, to give you another quick shout, like you do really practice what you preach. The computer that I'm using right now, you fronted me the money for and bought me because you were like, dude, you got to start making YouTube videos and your phone's not going to cut it. You fucking bought me a laptop. Like, It's those kinds of things that makes me go like, that's something that obviously like my parents would have done for me, or like a parent or something like in our immediate space. We forget sometimes that like sometimes we can just do those things for our friends. And that's been one of those things that sort of changed my mindset around like, oh, like we really do need to be sort of taking care of each other so the other person can grow, so that they'll raise me, and they'll front it to me and be able to pay me back someday in some way. And really, ultimately, what we're trying to do is set ourselves in a position where it becomes easier and easier to do generation after generation, because I feel like, however, I mean, like there's so many different places in history, I feel like, that you could point to as like, when did this all start to deteriorate? And it's going to be different at different points, like you could point to the Industrial Revolution or modernity, or even like World War II or something. Like the baby boomers, they inherited this world entirely different from ours, and the sanctity of the family disintegrated, no more rites of passage for men, and that's where it started falling. At some point, we lost that thing that, like you said, we've been trying to gain back. And I think the harder that we work now to establish that, the easier it'll be to continue it. Because I feel like it's hard to lose something like that twice. But I could be totally wrong. It would depend entirely on like how the actual game is played. That's what we're all trying to figure out, I think.
For sure. And I think, I've wrestled with these like big ideas and the issues you see out there. It's like, how do we, uncouple financial interests from big pharma, and how do we, heal the monetary system from this ever ascending fiat usury nightmare? And how do we reestablish rites of passage? What are you going to tell your kids about God when you realize that, the church that you were raised in was full of, PDFs and people who didn't have your best intentions at heart. And actually, the Vatican's a corporate interest, and, we could go as schizo as we need to, but the point is like, it's like, okay, I'm seeing the way broadly and it's problematic, but now how do I then, tasked with not a lot of core material, like completely rebuild these things? And, it is impossible to do alone. And this is why the idea of you are the Renaissance is so important. I wrote a post about this a while ago, but basically kind of these spheres of influence. It's not like an entirely novel concept to myself, but I was kind of elucidating the fact that like, if you want to get to this like institutional, generational level of change, which we all are striving towards, you have to start it yourself. Like when you are extremely competent and taken care of, and no one has to like baby you, if you're physically vital, you're robust, okay, that person can then go form a family unit in a concentric circle a little bit wider. A couple of families can collaborate and build a small town and village. Those families start working on things like education or medicine. And then once they figure out one or two of those out, they can collaborate to another, satellite community that's not far away. Now we're kind of reestablishing an institution. I hate to be like so, I guess like
big picture, like
no. I guess like I'm not trying to like pedestalize the agrarian ideal in the sense that we have to return to like just using sticks and mud. Like I don't think we have to abandon how far we've come with technology, but I do think that a lot is going to have to change in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years. And we're a part of that. But I do think it starts at the individual level. And then once you start finding your people, like really buy in and really invest and like lead with a sharp razor as far as who you keep around, and search for things that are kind of immutable, like people's character, their heart, their physiognomy, like these core kind of aspects that come into life. Like you don't want to have to, I don't want to get too fringe on the podcast, but you have to filter for certain characteristics, and then like from there we can start building outward.
You make a good point too, in that there's so much to be done in the grand scheme of things, right? And I think a lot of young men, when they kind of start to realize this predicament, they get overwhelmed. You look at the mountain and it's like, how can I even begin to climb that? And I think that makes a lot of guys who are alone and don't know what to do feel powerless and give up and doom and despair, which is, of course, what the enemy wants you to do, right, is despair. And you're right, you have to start small. It starts with yourself, then it goes to a couple friends, and you have to be willing to build slowly and build with a legacy in mind that it might not pass in immediately, might not pass in 5 years, 10 years, your lifetime, your kid's lifetime. You're building something far greater than yourself, and you have to rise up to your part. But it does start with the little things, and our modern world is so poisonous in a lot of ways. Health-wise, you have to lock in your nutrition and training. And that's something anyone can do. And it seems inconsequential when you say it's like, oh, there's PDFs in the government and in big religious organizations. How is going to the gym going to hold them accountable? But you have to be willing that you can't change the top level yet. You have to start.
If you don't go to the gym,
at the bottom of the pyramid. Yeah.
We must start a house. Frame mog the ruling class.
Yeah, I mean, well, but it's kind of like, it's like what kind of person is going to be the one who truly does like defeat evil? It's not just going to be some dysgenic loser who's just like sleeping on his mom's couch. Like
exactly.
So you can't build on a house of cards. Like you need to strengthen the foundation from the inside out.
There's something else Zach said a lot earlier about, might not all be Augustus or a Caesar type figure, what
Yeah,
have
I liked
you.
that.
But he was supported. He had great generals, and his troops were all excellent warriors. It's like he wasn't commanded like if a great man were to come, he can't do anything with a bunch of lowlifes, right? A bunch of just like losers who are on their couch. They can't form his army. Everyone needs to rise to the potential to give as much ability and capability and competency, as you said, the cultivation of competency on a large scale like that, I think is hugely important. And it starts with the individual realizing where we're at, but beginning to take action and not just giving up entirely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. On the topic, sorry, did you have something you wanted to say?
No, go for it.
On that sort of topic of starting small, starting within yourself. One of the things, Zach, that I've sort of like taken from you is this idea of like mythologizing yourself and sort of mythologizing yourself and creating your own mythology that like your mythologized self exists within, because like the stories that we tell ourselves are true. And so that's going to shape how you are painted to yourself and how the world is painted around you. And I think that that's a very important concept. And I will tell people that you have a really great podcast episode. I can't remember the name of it or which episode number it was, but you're talking about just like all the little things, like stuff that you've built to make it more sacred, just like those little things. When did you kind of realize, I know you've always sort of been that kind of person, but when did you realize how important that was, and what really solidified that idea for you of like the importance of creating your own myth?
Great question. And I want to say that it's like episode 88, which is kind of a cool number, but it's like this Design Your Life. I also have been off the podcasts for a while, so it'll probably be pretty recent in my YouTube and all the podcast players for those that are interested. But yeah, like you alluded to, I've always been kind of a tactile person, very handy, and always was very like gear oriented. Like when I was a little kid playing airsoft, I loved all the gear and like the kit that you would associate.
There airsoft airsoft player.
I bought this bag off of Zach. This is a custom made bag.
Exactly.
The zippers.
Yeah, I have niche interests. I'm a bit of a bag autist is one of them. But I made this podcast kind of realizing, and it's your answer to your question about the realization, I suppose kind of later in life when you start to constellate and look backwards. But the idea that we are in an extremely magical and romantic experience, and so much of how we experience that will come down to the idea that you can make love to the present moment and romanticize your life simply by how you engage with it. A lot of it comes down to, and there's a few threads I specifically want to pull on, but one thing you talked about is like, the story you tell yourself. You know, so much of our reality, we think our thoughts in words. And so speaking positive affirmation, white magic over yourself, it's the exact playbook that the enemy, the bad guys have been doing just in the inverse, right? Constantly pouring sickness, illness, fear, anxiety, worry over the masses, you know, with mass distribution. So the best thing that we can do is for ourselves, just get really consistent about auditing our own language, how we talk to ourselves in our head out loud about ourselves to other people. And then once you kind of have, you know, nurtured that muscle, like giving someone else the benefit of the same thing, catching them on their small language, like, oh bro, that's very sick. No, is it ill? Like, should we speak illness over each other? Should we use words like hell, death, and, you know, pardon my French. It's like, you know, I curse like a sailor. I think words are fun. I think we should say whatever we want, but I do think that the idea that constantly affirming the highest outcome, constantly repeating to yourself, and this seems very like trite and insignificant, but it absolutely is not, because we are ultimately a product of the things that we think, the things that we think are formulated in words, we interact with them with words. So that's a huge part of mythologizing yourself, is simply just using better language. Like imagine if you're writing this grand story, you might as well use the best language possible. And then back to the more material side of things, like you were alluding to in that podcast, I think that we have, you know, making love to the present moment. Every moment is an opportunity for adding deep depth and richness. And the world wants it to be very material and one note and insignificant. You know, it doesn't actually matter that much if you pray before you eat, or what you choose to put on your body. Just wear somebody else's jersey, wear some, Chinese manufactured luxury good. But the idea that you can bring into your life, just like a hero on his quest, magical little totems and items to make your experience better. I have like all custom like jewelry that I either made myself, designed myself. It's all silver, which I think is spiritually protective. Sidebar. But things like
we'll
this,
circle
right?
back to that.
Yeah, and we can. But like the point is like whether that's real, according to the scientism world, or whether it's just in my head, if it makes my life better and it reaps better fruit, you will know them by their fruit. I think the efficacy of a belief system, a religion, is how effective, like what fruit is that reaping in your life? And my life has only become better seating myself as the cause of my reality, starting to design little aspects of ourselves. And one of the lines in the Vitruvian Manifesto is like, you are the creator and his creation. So we are not only created by God into this reality, but we are creators. We are made like him in the sense that our hands were made to make things. So interacting with our world in little ways, like the desk that you work on or the bag that you have on your back, touching something like a touch point that you have every single day, that's a magical item. That is an item that you're putting your life force into. And the opportunity to add that richness with intentionality, I think is missed by many. But, I invite anyone to try the same in any small or significant way that they see. And I imagine it will only reap positive benefit in their life.
It's funny because people can debate whether or not it's a psychological phenomenon or spiritual phenomenon.
I disagree, but
yeah,
you can't debate it. But.
Well, people will try to, but even if you want to take a purely material perspective, there is information coming out all the time that studies and things that your mindset, the so-called placebo effect, constitutes real change. And what people can do with their minds. There was one study we covered in school where one group was given a milkshake and they were told it was full of sugar and everything, and the other group was given a health shake and the ingredients were the same, but the group that took the health shake had better outcomes in terms of their weight and all these things. And it's like, you can program your brain. You can argue and try to say, well, I don't believe in magic, I don't believe in spirituality, but even if you're not believing in that, it's psychology. Then there's no way around the fact that you can program
that it's working
your
somehow.
Life. Yes, that it's benefiting your life. And I think it's I've had kind of a similar experience in trying to romanticize everything, right? It's one of my taglines. I was always someone afflicted by analysis paralysis and trying to figure out the right thing to say or do in every situation. And I'd always end up just frozen and missing opportunities and wishing I had. And it's become a way for me to just act. It's like, I've got a sign from God, or a warning or an omen, or this just feels like it's calling to me. And it kind of makes your life feel magical, and you find it's way more valuable because now I'm actually pursuing it. I'm doing things. I'm not being killed by indecision. Great point, especially today when it's so easy to not be present.
Just be distracted all the time.
We've got these devices everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, the one biggest thing that like romanticizing my life has done for me is just like I pay attention to the birds. I pay attention to like the
synchronicity. My video coming out tonight is about bird watching, specifically waterfowl.
Amazing. Yeah. No, like literally I was just going for a walk with Chloe yesterday after dinner, and there was this bird that we saw sitting on a branch, and like, if our heads were buried in our phones, we wouldn't have seen it. And then we noticed that this bird was like, it was almost doing kind of like a dance. It was flying from like one branch, tweet, 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 fly to another branch, tweet, 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 and then it would come back. And it was doing this thing, but then like as we walked along it, it did it to the next branch and then came back. So it was doing like a zigzag pattern following us around the park essentially. And like it did it for like 10 minutes. And I was like, if we had not been paying attention, you wouldn't have known it was the same bird literally following you. And it's like, what does that mean? But just getting able to be present, like the amount of joy however insignificant, that brought to my night is so much better than whatever fucking reels I would have been watching with my head down.
In a way,
you know
it's
what I mean?
way more significant. That's energy that you generated instead of getting sucked
Joyous
out
energy.
of you.
Yeah.
There's a reason I think
as well. I hate to do the cutoff thing, but literally a falcon. I'm here in Arizona right now. Has landed outside the window right now, and it's just literally posted up. So in crazy, amazing energy. Just wanted to.
There's a reason I think so many ancient cultures and societies, birds were always. All animals can be omens and things, but birds always had that kind of element of being an augur, of having this really spiritual significance. And I think
especially because they're like in the sky. I think
they're flying and they sing, and they're very intelligent creatures, especially some species of birds too. There's something magical to avians. That is for sure, as we can see. A falcon has heard us and is now tuning in.
Absolutely. I mean, they occupy this liminal space between the heavens and the earth, and often birds were messengers. And an interesting bird story for myself is that when my grandfather on my dad's side passed away, at the ceremony at the church where we were putting his urn at the church, that we noticed that there was a bird that was there. And apparently, according to my dad, who would go to visit a couple of times, the bird was always there when he went to visit. And he asked, because he kept noticing it. And my dad is not particularly hyper spiritual or anywhere near kind of my level of schizophrenia. But, he noticed it to the point where he was, he asked the priest who was there, and he said, is the bird normally out there? He's like, there's never birds out there. So interestingly, after my dad told me that story, I started to kind of pay close attention, and I noticed as I traveled the world on my hero's journey, my grandpa didn't really get to see the world. He didn't travel a ton, but I know that he, loved and adored myself and my brothers as his grandchildren. And I felt that now they follow me, he followed me around the world. And what's crazy is that because it would always be in these moments where I'm reflecting, I'm standing on a cliffside somewhere around the world, and
the time that it takes to be present and recognize those things. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people who are against this idea is that they're like, oh, I don't have time for that shit. And it's like, what do you mean? Like,
brother, nobody has time. Bro, we don't have time.
No, nobody owns it. Exactly. It's simply passing. And it's like, what are you doing as the time is passing? But I think it's one of those things where we are so, and I fall prey to this too sometimes, this idea of just being super productivity biased. I think this is what happens to a lot of atheist types, is that they're like, well, it doesn't immediately benefit my life in any way. It's not making me money. It's not doing this, not doing that. And so therefore it does nothing, or it is meaningless. And I think it's exactly that's going to limit you from being able to experience miracles and magic. When people look out and they're like, how did this person go from this to this, and they didn't work as hard as me? What did they have that I don't? It's like, maybe they watched the birds a little bit longer than you did, bro. I genuinely think sometimes when people are like, oh, I'm just a lucky guy, that person's just lucky, they just got lucky. It's like, I think that maybe they might have been dreaming a little harder than you. Maybe they were watching the birds a little harder. They were paying attention and being present more than you. And it's not just
generating luck in a sense.
Yes. And all of the material things that they would have wanted.
Right, yeah. I mean, what is luck but you succeed in the opportunities that present themselves? How are you supposed to take opportunities if you're not paying attention, or if you're dissuading yourself from taking them? Lucky people are always picking up on that momentum and taking those little things forward. So I think 100%. There absolutely is something to lucky people.
Absolutely.
Other than just pure statistical chance.
If we take the cosmology that there is a creator, a God that loves you and has created this experience for all of us, just like you are a friend who makes an experience for another friend, or a parent who does something special for their child, who are you more inclined to just absolutely pour blessings into? The person who's completely enamored and so incredibly grateful in every moment just to be participating, or the person who is bitching and moaning because it's not how they expected it, or it's not how they would have set it up, or, you know, their feet hurt, or, you know, the Wi-Fi was slow today, or whatever you choose to like focus your attention on. I think that gratitude is that magnet. And I choose to see it as like, God is like, okay, well, this guy is absolutely maximizing the container that he has right now. It's the Matthew principle, right? I think it's Matthew 7:7 or something like this. You know, to those that have, more shall be given. And it's not about quantity. It's about the qualitative appreciation of what you have, because regardless of your station, I mean, every single person listening to this at least has access to the internet. I don't know what you're watching it on, but to sit richly and just be so in awe of the magic that's around you. I talked about this with Riva Tez on my podcast with her a number of years ago now, but I was still struck by that conversation. And like the quote, I always ask about like a person's favorite quote. She mentioned it's from Rilke, who's a poet. He's essentially thanking God. I'll misquote it now, but we can put it on screen or something. But it's like, thank you for everything, the beauty and the terror. And it's really kind of like a profound quote, because like beauty and terror, it's a lot, you know, but you don't really get to pick the things that are handed to you, but you absolutely can pick how you interface with them. And, you know, it's how I constellate the problem of evil. Cause like, I'm not a Christian. I don't claim sort of a traditional pedagogy of faith. So I don't have, you know, standard apologetics answers for people, you know, who might be more of a materialist, but trying to engage with spirituality. One of the hardest questions is like, well, why does bad shit happen? If it is this benevolent God, and not to say that I have the answer, but the way that I answer it for myself is it's something to the effect of, if there is a story and there are heroes in it, it wouldn't make for much of a story if there weren't dragons and goblins and ghouls and bad guys to face along the way. And in fact, some parts of the story, if it is an epic story, the hero is going to be down on his luck. He'll be in late stage Kali Yuga, and it'll seem like everybody is fucking doing horrible shit at scale, and you are completely powerless. And, you know, I think we're heading into our eagle moment to pull from the Lord of the Rings. I'm optimistic that, you know, the good guys win in the end, and this sort of epic narrative that we find ourselves in, whether on the micro individual level or on the collective societal level, you know, I think we are only headed towards positive things. I choose that not only as a assumption based on what I can see happening around me and understand about history, but also just it's an effective operating system. I choose to assume that amazing shit is going to happen, and we're going to be able to build, you know, the next parallel institutions, great next civilization. Like we're going to, you know, I literally think that like me and my friends on the internet are going to pen our names on the next Magnum Carta and like be able to write the next great stories. And like, I don't have patience for the person who isn't willing to engage with those ideas in the sense that they won't experiment with them. I have empathy for that person. And I hope that planting seeds of curiosity through posting content can invite them into a more romantic experience, like all three of us try our best to do. Because we're going to need as many people as possible. And like, it would suck if somebody was just so, you know, zogged out on their little black mirror that like they think that it's all doom and gloom. Because when you put the phone down and you just walk the fuck outside as far as you can from wherever you live, you will only find magic. You will only find magic.
You have a good point, because we are all kind of in a similar creating content, trying to romanticize, mythologize, vitalize the people. And of course you get people who, for some reason or another, want to push back and say, well, I can't do anything because of this situation. There's nothing we can do. People who want to doom. And at a certain point, it is sad, and you hope that over time people's minds change, because that does happen. I mean, we've all gone through our own journeys, and I wasn't always in this place of believing in these kinds of things for myself in the world either. So you hope some things sink in over time, but there's not much you can do for someone who isn't willing to help themselves, help you help them. What's the cliche that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And it's, you know, you get comments, right? I just posted a video about kind of this whole thing, really trying to be the hero. And yes, we live in a cursed time, but you still have to try your best and make the most out of the cards that you're dealt. And you get a lot of pushback of guys saying, well, it's different than it was in the past. You know, in the past you could pick up a sword, and now, well, now there's computers everywhere. And it's like, and it's just like, all right, well, if that's the way you want to see it, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm not your personal inspiration coach. If you don't want to swim and you sink, it's unfortunate, but that's where we are. But for those who are willing to swim upwards with us, I think we will all, in the end, as Zach said, we will have our moment of triumph, and good, if you will carry forth. But we've got to do the carrying to reach that story. It is kind of like Lord of the Rings. There's Tolkien said the eucatastrophe, I think is what he called it. But all the characters had to get in the position and do their part to make that eucatastrophe, that glorious moment where Gollum tips over with the ring into Mount Doom. Every character had to do their part to get to the ring, to the exact place it needed to be to fall. There was no free rides from fate. So we've all got our part in this grand journey.
Speaking of grand journeys, this might be a little bit of a diversion from what we've been talking about, but Zach, a book that you've recommended me, Hyperion, I finished, and I am now about 100 pages away from finishing The Fall of Hyperion. And to those who are unfamiliar, it's an incredible science fiction series by Dan Simmons. Is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Incredible. I recommend everybody to read it. But one of the things I wanted to ask you if you'd be willing to speak about is a few of our mutual friends, when I posted that I had picked that book up and was about to start the second one, all DM'd me saying the same thing, that it was a remembering of something that had already occurred. And interestingly enough, I don't want to spoil too much of the book, but a lot of it has to do with how time is experienced, oriented, who's in control of it, et cetera, et cetera. What is it about that book that you sort of resonated with so hard, and you and your guys like kind of agreed upon this idea that this was like a remembering, if you would like to dive into that, because I am very curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I have to pay all love and homage to my brother, Dustin Thomas. He was the one who provided it to me and the container that I was in, like a group chat with him. And, you know, I think that I wouldn't dare spoil an aspect of that book. It is
so good.
Truly, you know, I think it's one of the greatest series. I'm in Endymion now, book 3 of 4.
Cool.
Yeah, I just recently started it. It's extremely, extremely profound. I do think that, you know, some people might just read it as a science fiction story and keep it pushing. And I still think that they would have an incredible time. It's so well written. It's so dynamic, the way the story is told. I think for those that are, you know, slightly more initiated, it has incredible, incredible depth to it. First of all, I want to say rest in peace to Dan Simmons. That breaks my heart. He actually passed away this year.
Yeah, Dane just told me that like 2 podcasts ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, really sad, because as soon as, of course, I read it last year, I was like, I have to meet this guy. I have to meet this guy. So hopefully, you know, he's resting well in Valhalla. May his soul be carried well, and I'll get to see him one day. But as far as time, it's one of the most interesting ways that he plays with it. He also plays obviously with the idea of AI.
AI, yeah.
And I think what's, without, you know, going too into Hyperion, because I just don't know that it's our place to tread here specifically.
Sure.
I think that a lot of science fiction, a lot of anime, and again, science fiction, is both prophetic in the sense that it is saying what is coming towards us, but it is also disclosure, as in like what happened in the past. Things like 1984 and Brave New World, for instance. I think that these are retellings of stories that literally happened. Yeah. And then are also prophetic warnings for what is coming to us. So in this sort of like Tenet, Hyperion interpolation of time, I think that it is, again, I said it earlier in the thing, like we don't have time. People always say like, oh, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. It's like, brother, no one has time. Time is this secret third thing.
Right.
Okay? And I think it is some sort of circle spiral situation where there's an interconnectedness to the way it's interacting with the present moment. And, to go fully fringe and lose all my materialists, like I literally think that there are good guys and bad guys in the future who are going back through time to like lay seeds to, alter the course of fate. And, and I think that honestly, like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it sounds like you're saying like that is such a fringe idea. I almost don't think that it really is that fringe of an idea, and I think that anybody who's able to wrap their head around the fact that with AI and technology and all these things, we are constantly advancing. All of our science fiction, and I guess just science fiction, fantasy would be a little bit different, but all of our science fiction tells us about time travel being a possibility once we can have the technology for it. And if we are constantly innovating and improving our technology, isn't it inevitable that we're going to get to a point one day where we might be able to do something akin to time travel? And if that's the case, what is the limit of keeping somebody from coming back to right where we are today with that technology, thus allowing it to exist in essentially any time period you can go back to? Like, it's almost kind of like this catch-all where it's like the fact that time travel could be a potential in the future, and the fact that it's time travel means that it exists necessarily. It's like this weird, you know what I mean? Exactly. I don't think it's that fringe to say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and for people who like rigorously investigate any of this stuff, like if you go to like the highest level physics lectures on like really fringe corners of YouTube, a lot of science is now kind of discovering like particle wave theory, the interconnectedness of moments. We have obviously famously things like Schrodinger's cat. There are a lot of things, in my opinion, both like archaeologically, historically, written, art, and then also actual, science, physics, etc., on the highest level that affirms that something interesting is happening with how we experience time. And even if let's just like bring it back to an individual's experience of their own life. We say like, oh, I had we went hiking this weekend and time just flew. Or you're at a long day of work and it's just absolutely dragging and you literally can't get the clock to move fast enough. What do you think is going on there? Literally think about what is happening there. And then similarly, we hear old people say like, when I look back, time moved so quick. But when you're 5, you're only experiencing like the gravel in the playground. Like you don't have no perception of this like future state. There's no anxiety drawing you out of the present moment. Again, to bring back the idea of the present moment, like we have some sort of magical ability to like radically be here, and through cultivation of that skill, which it is a skill, I think that we start to interact with time in a really, really unique way. And again, I point people to like the material, like go start to read these things broadly and see them in all different mediums. There's different animes. Watch Tenet by Christopher Nolan. Read the Hyperion series. Like for those that this is like striking some sort of like intuitive chord, it's there to explore. But yeah,
I also recommend the C.S. Lewis Out of the Silent Planet series. It's something that in my Discord group we're reading right now because I posted something about That Hideous Strength and how sort of pertinent it is to just like what's going on now. And people in my Discord group were like, "Oh, like let's read that for the book club." And I'm like, "Well, we gotta read Out of the Silent Planet and Paralandra first." But we just finished Paralandra, and it's like so crazy that sort of like future prophetic perfect tense that's always occurring. It's one of those things where it's like you always kind of knew this was possible, but then somebody puts it into words so articulately that you're like, "Fuck, that is exactly what's going on," And like you don't read that and go, what a crock of shit. Like you read that and something speaks to your soul. And on the time thing, I'm so glad this is coming out after, because I literally just wrote a script like 2 days ago about exactly what you just said. The experience of time and how time is constantly changing depending on what sort of a state you're in. Kind of tying back to that thing about presence. And this idea that it has such an effect on how we perceived our lives to have been. Because if we lived in this state where we were constantly feeling like time was just passing us by and we didn't have enough of it, like we'll be depressed in the end, that sort of thing. But without going too much into that, on the experience of time itself, that's something that like constantly throws me for a loop, because like you said, with like the time travel thing and like the possibility of that being a thing in the future, and like not to spoil too much of Hyperion, I don't want to spoil any of it, but when they get close to the should I not say anything at all? I shouldn't say
think you'd be
anything
doing the
at all.
audience a disservice.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree with you. I want to so badly. Like maybe, yeah, everybody just go read it for yourself. I'm going to cut myself off.
I think it's for discussing for those that have read it. You know, there's no reason not to. It's out there. R.I.P. Dan Simmons, and you know, see what rings true for you, right? Like none of us are right in the capital R sense, but it's about like honing in and getting closer to the truth with a capital T. And a quote that I like about that in general, because I do think, you know, when you're wading through the Kali Yuga, it's like, what is even real? Like, not only where are we, but like, when are we? You know, issues with chronology. It starts to get insane.
Yes.
And to get to a place where you have any sort of way to tether with reality, first of all, it takes, you know, nervous system robustness, some amount of intellectual honesty. But beyond that, like, assuming you have those things and you still don't want to like lose yourself, a quote that I really liked, I read Reality Transurfing, which, sidebar, I do think is kind of an overwritten book. It's like more pages than is necessary for what it's trying to portray.
100%.
But one of the quotes was that, like, it was not like a main point, but it just popped off the page for me when I read it a few years ago, was the truth is always somewhere nearby. And I liked it, the idea that in our reality, we aren't going to get direct contact with capital T, like divine truth. Because of the nature of our reality. We're having a limited physical three-dimensional experience, and there seems to be something metaphysically beyond that. For those that have engaged with different plant medicines and psychedelics, you may have kind of had a more tangible experience of that, but obviously that's an altered state of consciousness. You're tuning into different frequencies. You can do this with breath work, meditation.
Breath work, that's what I was going to say.
And you can cultivate these to varying degrees, but the point is, like, we can get close. And I think it's about, you know, hovering as close as you can over the bullseye. And a lot of that is guided simply by intuition. You know, clearly the institutions at scale have failed us. You can't keep outsourcing the truth. I made a video about this a while ago. But like, we have to untrain or unlearn the impetus that has been railed into our heads since we're little, which is that, like, as soon as I have a question, I just look across and up to somebody else. Like, teacher, tell me X, Y, and Z. You do that for, you know, 12 to 15 years. And then, oh, wait, college happened, and you do the same thing. And you go to a job, and now you're just asking the boss, who learned from the guy, and now, you know, we're hundreds of years into this game with completely false material. So, and like,
the
learning
truth is all the way back there.
Like learning to go to first principles and ask, like, all right, hold on, like, who told you that, and like, how does this actually work, and what do you mean, you know, randomized clinical control study? What does that actually mean? Like, let's actually sit down and see what the science has to say about X, Y, or Z. I'll digress.
Kind of a fascinating connection when you guys are talking about Hyperion, which I haven't read. So Jonas, thank you for sparing me the spoiler.
I realized there was no way I could have put it without spoiling.
But with art in general, I was having a discussion on a podcast I did last week with the warrior philosopher and golden age vitalist, kind of about art and what art is for and why art is valuable. And part of the things that we were talking about was Salvador Dali's clocks, melting clocks. And Patrick, and kind of the point I liked was that art is there can challenge our perception of the world so that we can see things in a new light and articulate things we couldn't articulate before. And I think that's the value of these, you know, science fiction stories and things where it's like you couldn't conceive of another conception of time until you encounter
put it in that setting or something.
Yes, and Zach, you said on one level, generally it's a very entertaining book, engaging. But for those who are more initiated, there's more to it. And I think that's kind of what makes quality art so quality, is it can be engaged with on multiple levels and kind of help expand horizons. And also in that discussion, we were talking about David Lynch, a filmmaker, my favorite as well. And he talked about one of his films that kind of plays with time as a spiral. It's a circular story, but it's not a closed loop. It's spiraling, and you're just catching a fragment of the spiral. And that kind of changed my own perception of time and history, and how when people say history rhymes and that kind of thing, to me it makes a spiral makes more sense to me, how things kind of repeating patterns and all that, but it's not the exact same. It's spiraling out. So that's just, it challenged my perception of time in a way that made sense to me. When you're a kid, right, and you hear about like time travel paradoxes and stuff, it's like, what? I can't what? You sit there and you try to logic it out and it doesn't work, but art puts it in a way where
using the wrong logic.
Exactly. Art can digest in a way where suddenly it's like, okay, now I can kind of internalize and see what this actually might entail and be like. So I think that's why art is such an important part of our movement, if you will, a renaissance. I mean, the Renaissance, of course, art was foundational to the Renaissance, but it translates so far beyond entertainment, and art has been made into this just purely consumption entertainment zone, but it can be so much more, and you guys touched on that very well here.
Well, yeah, to hit on that note specifically, like Renaissance, literally the word means rebirth, right? And so if we're going to rebirth an era outside of what we find now, it does definitionally require going back. And our ideas or discussion earlier in the conversation about how do you rebuild rites of passage or institutions, I think a lot of it is actually going to be going back. And so we don't have to start from a blank slate. We can say, okay, but in a non-subverted sense, if we can get as close as we can to actual history, what did we come from? Like, what is the story of my ancestors? Like, what did they say about God? What did they say about our way to interface with the divine? And instead of having to start from scratch in the year of our Lord 2026 and tell your kids like something that you cooked up with your friends because of all the fiction you read, you could be like, actually 1,000 years ago, the Schenken family believed this. And,
right.
I went back to where our family was from and I got the runestones and like, here's the thing from the fucking mountain. And we're starting the tradition now because it's been lost and taken from us. Like these sorts of revitalizations, mythologizations of our individual families and then, wider is extremely important. And then the one other note I wanted to touch on with art and fiction, as we call it, sci-fi, these sorts of things. I think another critical function, and this is why like Lewis and Tolkien were so unbelievably prescient and absolutely had the codes, is that I literally think that to avoid what was going to happen, which is like the total erasure and burial of history. What's interesting about Tolkien is the first book that he released in his kind of famous universe was The Hobbit, which was sold as a children's story. It was sold as like literally a nursery sort of story, right?
Wow.
Totally. And so he gets put in this little container by the Popular Times as just, he's writing kids stories, just a fable.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about this guy. And then he drops all the lore into Lord of the Rings and the universe and the Silmarillion, because I think him and Lewis, these were scholars who had access to like the Bodleian Library in Cambridge around that turn of the century, where they were literally looking left and right and they're like, oh my God, they're going to lock the fucking door on all of our history. We have to drop the codes for the future. And the only way we can get away with it without being killed or having it also burned and erased is if we make it fantasy. And fiction and mythology. And I am someone, like, I don't like labels. I don't think it's particularly productive. But if I am anything, I am a mythological realist, which means that, yes, bro, dragons were real. And everything that you see on the cathedrals and in the paintings and on the maps actually fucking happened, because these people were not less serious than you were. In fact, they could speak multiple languages and actually read books. So these were very serious people. They didn't spend however long it takes to carve a giant statue thinking something up in their head about just some idea they heard somewhere. It's like maybe they just saw stuff and they created effigies towards these things. So that's what I wanted to say is like a core function, I think. And this starts to reframe how you see the world. It's like a way of looking and seeing the world. And once you kind of unlock this paradigm, at least in my experience, you can't really unsee see it a certain type of way. And I'm not here to evangelize.
You become initiated.
Yeah, and I don't want people to believe a certain thing about the world. I love pushback and the pressure of different ideas because it refines my ability to articulate my own thoughts, but also pushes me on my edges because I can't just take cool tweets that I've seen and become like an ideology based on those, right? I need to refine my own thinking. So yeah. I'm all for discussion. I just think that in my experience, I'm questing towards truth in the most earnest way that I know possible. All I want to get to is the truth. All I've ever wanted was that, so that we can actually interface in the right way with our reality. Like, it shouldn't have to be so hard. We shouldn't all be these little economic units raising shareholder value to pay $2,000 to live in a box that we don't even fucking own. Like, again, I'll digress before my tirade goes off, but it's I think the way out is actually going back and homage to Tolkien.
And to touch on that point exactly, one of the things that I wanted to mention earlier, I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but in Perelandra, and even in Out of the Silent Planet, the first book, one of the themes that kind of keeps coming up, and this won't be spoiling too much for people, but this idea that the myths that we believe on Earth, he frames it in a way of like, these things are things that actually exist on other planets that we have sort of forgotten or maybe have just become uninitiated with. Like, one example is the existence of dragons on Perelandra, which is Venus. And it's this idea that like, oh, if these exist here, then perhaps the ideas of dragons back on Earth wasn't necessarily just some recreation from nothing. It was a recreation of something that was understood of the past. And on that point of looking backwards, the Renaissance itself, the initial Renaissance, was a rebirth of classical Greco-Roman ideals and literature and these sorts of things. It was a revitalization of it in a time where, say, somebody like Plato existed. We're bringing back Plato's ideas and understanding them in the late medieval period. But even Plato himself was somebody who is looking back in his own time. The time that we were looking back to, he was also looking back, like he writes in his Timaeus, so he's talking about Atlantis. And he's like, this is something that I have learned was forgotten from my time, and I learned from my ancestor,
Solon.
Was it Solon? And Solon learned it from the Egyptians, who criticized the Greeks for having forgotten their own mythology, for having forgotten where they came from in their own stories. And the Egyptians got it from the Babylonian. And it's just like this constant backward, like every society, every civilization is always thinking like, what have we lost? Even the ancient Greeks that we look back to, they looked back themselves and they were like, what have we lost? And so for me, I think the most, we kind of touched on this on a previous podcast, Dane and I, talking about like going back to the invention of written language. That's where history begins, because we didn't have anything that we can solidly point to other than archaeology and that sort of thing. But it's like, imagine what that's going to do if we are able to find something from prehistory that shows, hey, we did actually have something written and we do have those stories. How much further back are we going to go, okay, what else was lost now? And it's this continual game that's truly never ending. But I think to kind of put a ribbon on that, it's because it is never ending. It's because it is circular, and it is this spiral of constant learning and unlearning. And even from a very secular point of view, there's the historical understanding of like civilizational cycles and rise and collapse, the rise of Rome and the fall of Rome, and the rise of the Holy Roman Empire and the fall of the Holy Roman Empire, and then the revolution and the modernity, and like all these things. It's obviously happening, so why would you not think that it's happening on a scale beyond that which we could readily perceive? And that's the key of the importance of mythology.
Amen.
I think I've mentioned this quote in another podcast, and the last time I mentioned it, I forgot the specifics, so I'm going to look it up right now. But it's Younger's quote on myth. Myth is not prehistory, it is timeless reality which repeats itself in history. I always come back to that quote when we talk about myth and kind of this repetition. And him and Tolkien, I mean, they were both World War I veterans on opposite sides of the war, obviously, and they philosophically took some very different lessons from warfare. You wouldn't really consider them like-minded in a lot of ways. But this is one thing they both value, and I have a half-written script somewhere about both of their quotes on the importance of myth. And it's kind of just what we're touching on here. It is, myths are real in a very literal sense, and they repeat themselves. And that's why these stories resonate with us. Going back to The Hobbit, The Hobbit's very personally important to me. Going into the mountains with my dad, he would play The Hobbit on an audiobook, and we watched this old Hobbit cartoon, this old animation. I don't know if you guys have seen it. And you can see the Gandalf staff behind me. I was a big Lord of the Rings fan growing up as a kid, and it's like those stories still have shaped me to this day. I used to meditate in the sauna playing one of the tracks from the Hobbit cartoon that was called The Greatest Adventure, and it's like, because I'm like, yeah, I'm on an adventure. I'm coming out into the world, little Hobbit. I don't know what I'm going to encounter, but I'm going to rise to the occasion, and it's going to be amazing. So all these myths serve as a blueprint for us to live our own lives to the fullest extent, and they will repeat in our lives, and they will repeat for our children's lives, and they repeat on civilizational scales. As Jonas said, civilizations rise and fall, but then something's reborn. Rome may have fallen, but we still talk about Rome, and we still try to carry Rome's embers forward. And Rome was carrying the embers of its past and on into the future, and maybe back to the past if we want to go circular. And I think that's all kind of beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think any Gothic souled man should, have his heartstrings pulled by the Lord of the Rings story. And I think that's for a very significant reason, to plant another, assigned reading or seed of curiosity for anyone listening. If you have not already read the Oralinda book, I think it's extremely important and interesting. I won't say, too much on necessarily what it is. It's a fairly short book. But if you want to start with like an interesting YouTube about what the book is, my friend Gabe, Disco Orpheus, who I highly recommend bringing on the show.
He will be. We've reached out already.
Perfect. So yeah, Gabe is a brother of mine. We spent some time in Buenos Aires and Guatemala together, as well as in Bali before. And
we're wearing
incredible.
His
yeah, true. Natural items.
Yes.
Shout out Aquari. But yeah, he recently made a video about the historicity and the kind of the question around the Oralinda book. So I just recommend anyone who's into European history, trying to learn more about their ancestry, to read that one, because I think it has some interesting overlap with what we're discussing about myth as history, the European story, as well as what goes on in Lord of the Rings. So a little assigned reading for everybody.
Sorry, how do you spell that?
Oralinda, so it's two words, OERA space LINDA.
OLB.
OLB.
Yeah, and I have to say, because I just finished his video the other day too, and I've watched other videos. I've never read it myself, which I absolutely need to, but I've watched videos about it in the past, like from Asha Logos and stuff, and he explains it very well himself, obviously in a little bit of a longer-winded analysis. The way that Gabe put it in his video was really concise, and I like the way that he tied in the sort of conventional history into those sorts of things, honestly, we've spoken about this before. This is a lot of what I'm trying to do with my content, is to show people like, hey, you could take the puzzle pieces of what we have been given, what we've been told, and don't take it at face value. It's all meant to be learned and understood in a way that's, history used to be written to instill heroic values and to instill ideals into a people. And then we've sort of boiled down history into this thing that just lists facts and don't look anything beyond that. Don't worry about what it means. And I think that you lose something so important in the nuance of why did those things happen? Why does the story of Atlantis continually come up in these ancient texts? Why was it so real to these people? And was it just because it was a story that they were all told and so they all just collectively believed in it? How different is that from reality, from what you have been told and what you believe and how that shapes the world around you? And so I think that for the more initiated, they can jump into those things a little bit quicker. But for the lesser initiated, they need to hear the true history first in order for them to go, that's interesting. So this just randomly led to this other thing? And it's like, well, no, not really. It's not random. It was actually because of this and this and this, and there was this person that existed. All those little nuanced things that people, I think, that aren't necessarily inclined to want to research history, they're not going to be immediately drawn to those things. So maybe the science fiction, the fantasy, the mythology can aid them in that direction. But at the end of the day, it's all going to lead you to the same place if you continue to dig enough. And so I think that it's kind of our job as individuals to be sort of pushing on those things, and whatever your specialty, whatever your skill set is, to be able to lead people in that direction. We're all going towards, we all want truth, right? Who doesn't? And so I think that being able to find our niche and to be able to raise people through those avenues, that's our calling in a sense, you know?
Yeah. And to say, to answer your question there, like, who doesn't want truth? It's, it's the people that benefit from a lie. And,
Right.
to push back a little bit on what you said there, we used to write history to have these aspirational ideals. I would challenge, like, have you ever met a historian? Like, what do these people look like? What are these people? Who are these people?
Yeah.
Like, what are their names? Where do they come from? And what are their preoccupations and dispositions? And then, the very age old but extremely important idiom of, like, if the news is fake, if we can all agree that things on the news are fake, we see things on the news and it's like, oh, that could be a spin. This is probably not how reality is currently happening a day ago or whatever. Imagine history. Imagine having not only hundreds or tens, but thousands of years to completely burn, erase, destroy, and pillage thousands and thousands of books, to turn countries to ash and rubble. The erasure is at a scale that is, like, hard to kind of reconcile and fathom. So my encouragement to those that are into history is just be able to play in the world where it's like, I'm just curiously investigating what's going on, and I don't have to have an answer. One of the challenges, obviously, you and I, Jonas, have talked about this at length about making historical or mythological content, is you kind of have to take a stance on how something happened, and to provide too much nuance would be to kind of lose the ability to engage the listeners.
And you're just philosophizing.
Right. And I think that, like you're saying, that kind of the call to arms for us is, let's try to plant those seeds of curiosities. Let's build bridges for people who are on one side of the fence, but, like, they're curious, they're open to it. They just haven't been given the right information. I mean, one of the things about my former life is, I studied biomedical engineering at one of the top universities in the world for engineering and sciences. And a lot of my peers were pre-medicine. So these were extremely intelligent people, smarter than myself, who wanted to help people. And one of the things that angers me to no end is that these people who want to help people and want to do good with their life are investing hundreds of thousands of dollars and decades of their life into material that, in my opinion, has been completely subverted from actual healing modalities and has been completely institutionally captured. And so from first principles, like, the things that they're studying, the people who they're studying from, and the people that they studied from, no one knows anymore. No one knows. The material isn't there. So it doesn't mean that those people are bad, or that doctors who prescribe pharmaceuticals are bad people. In fact, they're probably incredible people. They're just it's a rock and a hard place. I mean, imagine graduating, after a decade of study, hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans, and you finally now get to earn your way out of that problem. And the only way you can do that is by cashing pharmaceutical checks for Moderna and Pfizer and the squad. It's like, who are you to say that, like, I'm not going to claw my way out for my family? And, to the best of their knowledge and everything that they studied, this is how it works. And that example maps onto all other explainism verticals in our world, whether it is economics or history or, pick the thing. I think that we're in an extremely kind of inverted and subverted space. And so
even
exactly. I mean, like, all of us were raised in the, the wake of new atheism. Like, we saw the peak of woke and new atheism. Like, when we were coming up and I was raised in Christian schooling, I was raised Christian, it wasn't cool when I was like 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 to say that you believed in God. In fact, that you were like a bigot, or you were dumb, or you were backwards. And so our entire generation was pushed away into this empty, vacuous, infinite, dark space, the vacuum of space where, there's no God, we're just a pale blue dot. And so that is like what we're riding on. Great. I'm very grateful to see this sort of like resurgence and pushback from our generation at scale on social media. I hope that it's real and proliferating as much as it is. I tend to meet people who are more valence towards exploring the potential of the divine and some sort of more magical aspects of our reality. But we experience that. Our parents experience different forces and pushes in their kind of, mainstream media eras. And this has happened for quite a while. And then you can imagine pre-television, what happens when you burn the Library of Alexandria? What happens when you seal the Bodleian Library? What happens when the Vatican gets to take whatever they want and show it to no one? Like, what are the consequences of this proliferated out? What happens when a certain specific family purchases all of the medical literature and completely rewrites it for all the education in the United States? Like, these consequences, we're living in extremely strange times. And it is just to say that those people that arrive to an Instagram reel about history or about anything, medicine, and they're like, well, actually, this is the exact way that it happened and you're wrong because why? It's like, brother, we are getting false news reports from yesterday. Imagine 2,000 years ago. Like, imagine just honestly, just be intellectually honest enough to admit that we don't know and we're trying.
It's fear for them, a lot of it, I think.
And Jonas, we kind of discussed this in our last episode with Paleo in the Reconquista, and you've got the Christian Chronicle and the Muslim account of events, and there's clear that something happened.
But their accounts of it are just unbelievably different. Yeah.
And then it's like the truth's probably in there in the middle, but it's you can't say for certain yourself. You weren't there, you didn't participate. And even if you participated, you and I can go hang out and have an experience together and have different stories, right?
Right.
Everyone's got their individual perception, and as Zach said, the sort of capital T truth, it might be nearby, but it's doesn't really exist universally, at least in a way a bunch of individuals can discover together, right? So it is kind of, you do have to wonder about a lot of things that pass through so many hands and so many minds and through so many perspectives, where even if there's grains and kernels of truth, they get pushed through these sieves, and it's you really don't know when you get a headline. You don't know, and people pride themselves so much on being informed, on knowing. I have a script mostly written about this, like this idea of I don't know if you guys saw these spring breakers. Someone went around interviewing them, asking them about geopolitics, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know where Iran is," And everyone's like, oh, look at these stupid college kids. They don't know anything about the world. And it's like, well, what do you know? You've read all these news reports about events halfway across the world, but how do you know those reports aren't just crap, aren't just kernels of truth that have been distorted and exaggerated, if not outright lies? Like, you're just feeding your brain with all of this vacuous half knowledge that you can't interpret correctly. And it's like, I think those college spring breakers are living more truthful, earnest lives than you are reading your headlines. And I didn't get the video out in a timely fashion, but I'm reworking it into another script. But this idea of being informed gets as this ultimate value for our society has not been healthy in the degree it's been taken to.
Yeah. And to even kind of go somewhere maybe a little bit more sensitive, I hope that it's okay. I think we've brought this up on previous podcasts, but like with the release of the Epstein files, this is kind of one of those things where I think collectively as humans, we all look at that and we go, okay, these people are monsters. There is evil in the world, and they're very clearly good at hiding it, at least for the time being. And then the question, like, for me kind of became like, okay, so all of those things that the conspiracy theorists, the people who were like thwarted for having these ideas and saying these things, like they've all been vindicated and all of it has come to light. One, does that now mean that we can all collectively agree that we are being lied to and there's things that are being hidden from us even now? Like the release of it is not the end of it. You know what I mean? And secondly, if those forces that be are so powerful that they were able to sort of like keep this hidden from us for so long, why was it able to be released? And then you have to start to play the like meta game of like, what is the next thing that like we should actually be paying attention to, that this thing is a potential distraction from? Like it goes way deeper than we could even possibly fathom.
Yeah. I'm not saying this is fully my view, but I've read this opinion before, and I'm partial a little bit to it, that part of it might be a demoralization tactic of like, we hint at all these, the evil things that they're up to, and it's like kind of dangling as a, well, you can't do anything about it. It's like nobody has really, Epstein was killed or died or what have you, but it's like no one has really taken the fall for it. Nobody's been punished. All these people are still in power, more or less. So it almost feels like they're kind of taunting you with it, of like we're on top, we're up to no good, but you can't get out from under us either. And it kind of goes back to the beginning where it's like, I think a lot of people see this scale of evil and just shut down because they're like, nothing's happening. I can't possibly fix any of this. So I'm not saying that's necessarily the whole truth, but I think that's a valid perspective on, as you say, why did they let that be released if they're so powerful?
Yeah, and one thing I would add on that, because I definitely, when we tread into these sort of waters, I think it's important to end with like an empowering takeaway, like a white pill on the situation, is like, if all of this effort through time, through history, through pharmacology, through the shit they're putting in the sky, putting in the food, putting in the Wi-Fi, putting in wherever you have you, and then obviously what they're doing at scale in the so-called ruling class, if all of this effort has been required to mitigate your individual power, imagine how unbelievably unlimited your power is. Imagine how big God's plan is for your life. And all of this theater, this occult theater, the sort of ant farm that we find ourselves in, can entirely be transcended through epic uses of free will. And so I think embodying your life as powerfully as possible, never taking a decision made in fear or anxiety, always choosing not only the most exciting path forward, but envisioning the highest outcome for your life. Because the amazing thing is, it only gets better than your highest. Like, God has a bigger plan for you than you can think of. So literally write down the biggest dream you can possibly think of, and it will be better than that. I promise you, because I've experienced it time and time and time again at this point. And if at any point in time, and I've had to tell this to, I have plenty of sensitive young men in my friend group, and it can be demoralizing. You get too close to certain topics or issues, and it's like, it's a bit dark. And I think the thing is that if noticing at any too acute of a degree starts to reap negative fruit in your life, as in you're anxious, you feel powerless, then that is something that you need to remove from your life. Just like at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about belief as this technology, the things that you believe either reap positive fruit or don't, and just believe the things that make you powerful. Same thing about learning and education and noticing and going down the rabbit holes. If it starts to take power away from you, then you have lost the plot. You have gone somewhere that, God doesn't want, or doesn't need you to be, I should say. And, understanding that you have free will in this game and using it in the most radical and exciting way possible is how you completely, exit the cage.
Tolkien actually does kind of talk about this. Denethor has the Seeing Stone, and he sees the fleet of black ships coming. Sauron shows him this fleet of black ships, and he goes, well, we're doomed. The black reinforcements of the enemy are coming, and we can't possibly stand against it. But what Sauron doesn't show him is those black ships have been taken over by Aragorn and the other men of Gondor and everything, and that delivers the city, and Denethor, of course, perishes. He goes mad from peering into the stone, so he doesn't get to see his city liberated and the siege lifted and the victory of the good guys. So exactly what you said. If Sauron is showing you things that are driving you mad and taking power from you, put down the stone, and yeah, you can greet the heroes when they come. So I think that's a powerful message.
Beautifully said. Well, we're at about an hour and a half here. I have to admit to everybody that I totally dropped the ball, and before we were going to start this podcast, I wanted yesterday to post a Q&A so that people could drop their questions in here. I know, yeah. And so I tried to post one like an hour ago, and we were only able to accumulate one question. It's a good question, but I also have a few other questions that I wanted to target to both of you guys myself. The first one is from Snake Oil Fan. He asks, if you could see a photo from any historical era before cameras existed, when would it be?
Did he specify a photo, like what kind of photo it had to be, or literally a photo of anything you...
Just see a photo from any historical era. If you could send a camera back in time.
Oh,
it's tough because I feel like I wanna send one back like as far as possible, but like, what if you send it too far back and then...
It's just, yeah. Well, because there's the question of like moments in history, because there's moments in history, but then like if you're talking more about like general living, that kind of...
I think that because the question...
It's a photo, right?
Yeah, like a snapshot. Yeah.
I think you can frame this question kind of however you want because it's so vague. We can put our own little spin on it. So where does your guys' mind take you when you hear this?
I don't want people to get the wrong impression about me, but this is related to the Hyperion universe and some things that me and Jonas are interested in. But I feel like unequivocally, I'd want to go around 70 AD.
70 AD.
Yeah. Somewhere in there, and I'm going to drop it somewhere. Well,
there was like a temple that was destroyed or something during the Roman Empire. I can't remember.
Just be curious what was going on. I'd just be curious what was going on around then.
Dane?
Oh, to not tread the same ground of that area in time. I would be very curious to drop it around the time of, I don't know what century that'd be, late Bronze Age, Greece and Anatolia. Catch maybe something around
like 11th century BC, or I guess that'd be like 13th century BC, like around 1250, like Trojan War time.
Yeah. I would love to get a snapshot. I'm not sure. I'm not going to... I would love to get a snapshot of, like, Achilles, right? I won't dictate the camera that far, but I'd love to get a snapshot of these warriors besieging Troy or on their ships or what have you, and really get a... So then I could come back and go show Christopher Nolan, you bastard.
Yeah.
This is how awesome it looked. And this is what you're doing to history, but yeah,
you gotta trust Chris, bro. He hasn't let us down yet. So
I will say, as much as I may bag on the aesthetic choices so far, I genuinely do hope it is a good film. I think a lot of people, when they like get on the hate train of things, they almost like want things to fail to kind of fit their like hatred, like this. I want to hate everything. Yeah. But I do not want Nolan to fail in making a powerful mythical movie. I hope, despite my reservations, I hope it is genuinely powerful. And I think even if it's not, myth will shine through, right? I mean, that is the power of myth. You can only subvert myths so much without its core truth shining. But yeah, that's where I'll send my camera.
There's your guys's two that you've already picked, I think, are like among my top choices. So I'll go, I think it would be cool to send back a camera to the time when the Great Pyramid was being built and see what was actually going on. How was it actually being built? I know it's one of those things, it's like the most played out, like question of, was it aliens or was it really just like intensive slave labor? But at the end of the day, I think any answer is going to be spectacular. So to actually just know and kind of have the final say on that, I think would be pretty interesting.
To see it mid-construction too would just be, no matter what the truth is, just to see it in that kind of halfway form would just be awesome, as you said.
Yeah. And just seeing the giants walking around moving to those stones would just be like incredible.
No, you're gonna see
to be able to see that. Yeah, all the above, probably.
Both?
Yeah. Dropping the giants down from the spaceships, lifting the stones.
And the slaves catch the giants in big nets from the spaceships.
Exactly. Okay, Brian Hopkins 111 asks, who are your top 5 philosophers? 5 is kind of a lot. If you don't feel like you want to pick up 5, you could just give maybe your top couple. Can I add to this? I feel like, because one of the questions I wanted to touch on earlier, which I feel like we didn't quite get to, so maybe you can combine both in your answer, is how much your outset from the beginning of your entrepreneurial content creation journey, when you first created the Vitruvian, and how much that has evolved over time as you have evolved. Like, who has been influential in that? Like, what top 5 authors, poets, writers, who has been the most influential there?
I mean, obviously, I think when I was young, I was really captured by this idea of Leonardo da Vinci. Obviously, I have extremely fringe theories about and ideas about the past. So I don't know who this character was. Was he a time traveler? Was he somebody who, is he a complete fabrication of history? I kind of, can hold 2 ideas in my head at once and like be enamored by the character that I'm given and not need it to be some type of way. So, Da Vinci is very profound because like he was a man of many, talents. He was a true polymath. He was capable of physics, engineering, art, anatomy, all these sorts of different things. So I think that's awesome as like an aspiration because he was like a man in relatively recent history that was able to capture all these different verticals and didn't really compromise. So I think that's really cool. But of course, all the great heroes of history as well, like Heracles and Perseus and Achilles and, many of those characters. As far as, philosophers, I was raised in a Christian home. So I think that Christ as a character, and recently my friend Dustin, who I'll hearken to as well, shout out to his Substack, Bruce Wayne Hours.
Yeah, definitely shout out.
He wrote a recent article on kind of the cosmic Christ. I won't speak for him at all, but this idea of this transcendent figure, because as he points out, and I'll just plant this as a seed of curiosity, I'm no evangelist, I'm also not a Christian, but there is no other God of forgiveness. And that is a extremely profound realization in the way that we interact with our lives. If you do not have a God of forgiveness, if you do not have forgiveness in your life, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
So all that to say, plant the seed of curiosity, go read his article. It's very good. But I'd say Christ as a philosophical sort of character, the idea of, the heaven of earth is within, the idea that God embodies us, the Holy Spirit is within. These sorts of ideas are pretty transcendent when you start to understand them.
The void which binds.
Yeah, many such, the Beatitudes, the idea of like you sow what you reap, the Matthew principle. I mean, just there's a lot of sauce in there as kind of co-subverted, I think the Bible is, and the religion itself is. So Christ, and then I think as any sensitive young man, you find your way to Nietzsche at some point. I think there's something, we talked about this on our second podcast, Jonas, but the idea of just there's will a very vitalistic idea with the will to power. Like something about that is extremely resonant, and if no other reason that it makes me feel powerful. It's like I can be great, and history will bend to my will, because again, I think free will is an important part of our reality, and it's like, why not me? I love that idea, like ascending and trying to become the Übermensch is powerful. And obviously Nietzsche is widely misunderstood. Most people say they've read Nietzsche, haven't read Nietzsche, so I'm not trying to actually go read Nietzsche and see what you see, for those that have any sort of way that they think about it. I think reading a lot of the Western canon is really important, like reading Hegel, reading Schopenhauer, I mean, the list could go on and on. I think I'd have to really reflect, but then I also think of like a lot of these authors that we talked about as massively philosophical, incredible thinkers like Tolkien, Lewis. Like Lewis is all time.
Lewis is in my top 5 for sure.
Dan Simmons, simply because I haven't even read his canon yet, but simply because of the Hyperion cantos, like changed my life and is extremely pertinent to our age. So yeah, I mean, I really could go all day long, and I of course, as soon as we end this, I'll kick myself for not mentioning someone. So for any of my fallen mentors and looking down from Valhalla, I apologize, but that's my list.
You want to throw any in there, Dane? Any of your top philosophers come to mind?
I think Zach kind of touched on a few there, and it's like, how strict do you want to be with the term philosopher? I mean, does it have to be someone like a Spengler or a Nietzsche? And Nietzsche would be on there. But like Tolkien, I mean, he is one of the most foundational creatives in my life that's influenced where I am today. And how much leeway are you willing to give him as a philosopher, But there's certainly philosophy within his mythos, within Lord of the Rings, within even The Hobbit, right? So I since I'm not a true philosopher in the sense of I rigorously studied philosophy, which I have not, I will say Tolkien is up there, Nietzsche is up there, David Lynch is up there if we're going to broaden the creatives to include creators in a philosophical sense, and I will put Younger up there as someone who's been extremely important, and he of course was more philosophically aware himself. He read Nietzsche and a lot of these figures as well, and then he would go on to influence people too. I believe Evola read him, or he read Evola. Some kind of interplay there, but I will say those 4 figures. And as Zach said, there's probably someone really important I'm forgetting that I'm gonna kick myself, but
it's meant to come up at a later time if that's the case.
Cormac McCarthy, that's another one. Now I'm just really
there you go.
I'm really just listing off my favorite authors and artists, but I think philosophy you can't really separate.
No, and that's something that I like to live by too. Like if I was going to throw one in my top 5, would be Homer. I think that like those just foundational texts are incredibly important. I would also have Plato in my top 5. It was just like, this is the first philosophy book I ever read was The Republic, and it's what got me hooked on just wanting to explore those ideas. I also do consider myself a little bit of a Platonist, at least like in theory. Jesus would be in there as well, like Zach said. C.S. Lewis is up there. I'll leave it at 4. I think that we get shot under 5.
Can I throw out one more that also might help you?
Oh, Yukio Mishima. Let's go Yukio.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that one's core. I talk about him way too much for him to not be in there. Very cool. Well, that's all the guest questions that we had. However, I do have a few final closing questions because Zach, as you do on your own podcast, you have 3 questions that you always like to ask your guests, and I think that they're great questions. So I want to send them back to you. First question is, what is a quote that resonates with you or that you try to live by?
Ooh.
Didn't know you were going to get your own questions, did you?
No. Of course. I mean, I think that any good question asker, reflects like if this were mirrored back to me, what would I say? But it's also been a while since I've put a podcast up, so admittedly out of form. But I think this has evolved. There are definitely a few that come to mind. Can I list a few, or is that breaking my own rule?
Wait, I don't care. This is our podcast. Okay. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, fair. So they're in no particular order here. One is Heraclitus, which is character is fate. And if I had to pick one of my 3, gun to my head, I think it would be that one. I really think that it mirrors the ethos of the Vitruvian and You Are the Renaissance. Truly, like the life that you experience is a product of who you are.
Right.
The second that comes to mind is from Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and it is wisdom is a woman, and she loves only the warrior. And to me, what that means, or how that resonates, is that, as someone who is, fancies himself an intellectual, I think about things, I think about ideas, I'm very cerebral, or I can be very cerebral. The important reminder is that, true wisdom and gnosis is learned through being the hero, actually living the story. It's not a theory. It's not something you're going to read in a book. You may read it in a book, but that's a story of a hero who did some shit in real life. As I said, I'm a mythological realist. So it's like, go be the hero and actually follow your hero's journey, take on legitimate risk, whether physical, financial, or otherwise. And, it's through that you'll experience real transcendent wisdom that you can then impart to people. And it's not just theory. It's not just some, all of us make content. It's this very ephemeral. It's real. It's lore. Like, we touched the ground. We did the thing. We went to the place. And then, the one that I
speaks about that.
Mishima does speak of this. And then the final one that I'll leave is one that used to be my favorite quote, and I'll try my best to recall it off of the dome, but it's from David Data's Way of the Superior Man. And again, it relates deeply to the Vitruvian ethos, but it is, you were born as a sacrifice, and you can either participate in the sacrifice, dissolving into the giving of your gift, or you can resist it, and that is your suffering.
Whoa.
Yeah. Super powerful, incredible book. I think David Data is an incredible teacher. I know people now personally that have studied under his pedagogy and his, have been tutored by his pupils. And I think, generally speaking, he's reaped good fruit in this world. So, I don't holistically agree with every piece of his philosophy, but I do love that it is extremely idealistic. And, interesting synchronicity, his book cover of that book is the Vitruvian Man. So kind of maybe a good way to round it out there, but those are my quotes.
Nice. Dane, do you have any cool quotes coming to mind?
Gosh, now you're turning the questions on me.
I mean, you're here, Never asked you this before.
Yeah. I will. This is from, again, I'll bring up David Lynch, the show Twin Peaks. It's every day, once a day, give yourself a gift. Spoken by Detective Dale Cooper. And for me, it is every day you have to give yourself appreciation for yourself and what you're doing and the things you're going through. He's a detective solving a horrific case and battling this metaphysical force of evil. But he does not skip out on his donut before he goes and works on this. And I think that mentality, it's not an indulgence mindset where it's like, people who will say, oh, I'm having a cheat meal, and it's like 3-course dinner at the whatever that blows their whole diet away. But it can be anything. It can be you give yourself a time to go to the beach. You give yourself a new item of clothing. You give yourself time to relax. You take a night off. There's always little things you can give yourself. But if you have to be grateful for the effort you're putting in and show gratitude to yourself. And I always get in that mindset of just like, no matter what you do today, show some gratitude to yourself and the progress you're making, even if it's in a little form. And I like that. People aren't kind enough to themselves, and I think that's important.
Nice. I think I even mentioned this on one of the last podcasts that came up kind of organically, but I have as my lock screen here a photo of Hercules with this constrained quote from Epictetus, which is, how long are you going to wait before you begin to demand the best of yourself? And I think that that's something that's always, even now, like, I'm one of those people that I get too far ahead of myself and I start to feel like I'm running out of time, and as we have just discussed, none of us have time. So I have to constantly remind myself of that. And I have to remind myself, one, to be present, and two, just to like not wait any longer, like what can you be doing right now and this doesn't necessarily mean just being busy and productive and all these things, but like, am I making the right decisions? Am I taking the right steps every day? Am I being true to myself every single day? And so that's something that I just like to keep on my lock screen to constantly remind me of. So that's my favorite quote for the time being. Zach, if you could go back to any younger version of yourself, I think I'm asking these questions correctly. If you could go back to any younger version of yourself and give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Keep going, young man.
Beautiful and easy. What about you, Dane? You got anything?
Without I don't want to
Steal Zach's. You're not allowed to.
I don't want to cut out too many personal affairs to air out, dox a certain time of my life, if you will, and the people involved. But what I would say to a 21, 22-year-old me is that if something is shying away from you and you can feel it, don't keep trying to grasp it. You are going to hurt your hand and you are going to crush what you're reaching for. So that I don't want to necessarily dive into exactly how that would be applied, but that generally is what I would advice I would give myself in that time. And that's kind of if something isn't right and you're getting signs from God or what have you that it's not for you, listen to those signs. And
yeah, interesting. Kind of, I mean, like I just was thinking about this now based off of what you just said, because I've given this answer twice on Zach's podcast, and I was trying to think of like what's another piece of advice I would give. And I was just thinking about the fact that I mean, like any kid, you're always trying to figure out where you fit in and that sort of thing. And you're always kind of trying to like figure out like, what do I have to form into to become what I am supposed to be? And we don't really look inward enough. We keep looking at those around us. So I'm kind of tentative on the fact that like, I wonder if I would give this piece of advice to my younger self too early, if I wouldn't have met those like, events that have shaped who I am. But I think that I would tell my younger self, who didn't ever really felt like he fit in anywhere, to lean into who he knows he's supposed to become. Because I think that that's one thing I can say for myself. Like, my life changed when I turned 19 and I got this opportunity to go fight wildfires in Washington, because it was the first time that I ever moved away from home. It was the first time I ever lived away from my friends I had grown up with my entire life. It's my first time being pulled out of my comfort and routine. And it just, in those short 6 months, my entire character and personality just like transformed, because there was no mold I was forcing myself to fit into. And that's when I like found myself. If I could have done that earlier, I wonder what I could have accomplished, I guess. But not for me to wonder.
To Zach's point, I do like keep going forward, young man, in the sense that these mistakes and things,
you'll get there.
We are exactly where we're supposed to be right now. So I love that mentality. Maybe it's best not to tamper with your past self, right?
One of your guests, Zach, I can't remember who it was, but he said nothing. He was like, I wouldn't go back and tell him anything. I can't remember who that was, but it was very profound.
Yeah, I mean, I dabbled with the same idea, and it's kind of why I went with what I went with. But I think an encouraging word always helps, and
totally,
that's all he would have needed.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm proud of you. That's all it takes, right? That's all a man ever wants to hear. Last question. What is your unique gift to give to the world?
I knew this was coming because you pulled the tricks out of my bag. So
I was gonna say, I was like, it's not so on the spot, right?
I was starting to think, and this is obviously something that I could answer in a sort of multiplicitous way, but I'll answer it in a unique way, relevant to a conversation I had with a friend. We were walking on the ranch that I'm staying at here in Arizona, and we were discussing this kind of interesting idea. I believe, I don't know the exact Latin words, but it basically means your name is your fate. I think it's novus fatum or something like this. And it is this unique idea that obviously, we talked about the importance of words, and naming things and people is really important. It's another thing that is extremely magical in mythologizing our lives. I already have a list of the sons and daughters that I pray to have one day because I think it's extremely important. Now, my parents named me what they chose to name me, and it is my name. And interestingly, after entering into my journey and beginning down this specific path with the Vitruvian and everything, I heard this idea and I was like, interesting. I wonder what my name means. I knew that my family name Schenken comes from the German to give a gift or the gift. And so I was curious, like, what does Zachary mean? I always thought it was like Zach is kind of just like a generic, Chad like white guy name. It's not super cool. It's not like, Augustine or something, but either way, it's my name, and I've, come to love it. And I was interestingly investigating it. And so to close this loop, my unique gift to give the world, I answer that by saying it's myself, and my name, interestingly, means the Lord has remembered to give a gift. So what I'm trying to do ultimately, at as large of a scale as I'm allowed, is help people connect to their gift to give the world, because I'm extremely passionate about that. I think that we each have a specific place to be. And I find myself unconsciously doing it. Every time I meet somebody, I'm like, playing this kind of like cheerleader coach character, like calling them as high as I can. And it's not because of some sort of, I don't know, it's very unconscious. I just start doing it because I'm so excited by people's potential, and it hurts me to see the hurt in other people, because obviously any one of us would admire each other, but I know that when the camera turns off, we have our limiting inner monologue and that lower self and self-critiquing, and we're never tall enough and lean enough and well-spoken enough and rich enough, and it just keeps going, right? And to offer those words of encouragement that pour light into other people is something that I aspire to do, and the important, second half of that is to continue to do that for myself.
Well, I can certainly say, just to give you your flowers one more time, that's absolutely who you are, and I'm very grateful for our friendship, because you above all other people you're very just willing to be extremely honest and truly like helpful in a way that is not indicative of you trying to get something else in return. Like the amount of good advice that you've granted me that's just like panned out well for me, I'm just like, wow, that was really cool. I didn't have to prompt him or ask him for advice or anything. So that is super interesting to hear that that's where your name comes from, because it's very much who you are. Super interesting. I'm very grateful for you coming on this podcast. I think that this is obviously a long time coming. We've been talking about it since like episode 1 came out. So it's great to finally have you on. We'll have any links that you have to all of your stuff listed below in the description. Is there any last thing that you wanted to tell people, like what you're working on or like where they can find you, that kind of a thing?
Yeah. Well, obviously, thank you guys so much for the opportunity. This was super epic. We covered really cool ground. I think flowed super well. And again, to echo what I said at the outset, I think you guys are doing awesome stuff. You're cultivating this really cool container, which is like, a collaboration of your two individually really powerful brands. And yeah, I just want you guys to keep pushing extremely hard and collaborate at the highest level with other people doing it, because like you said, rising tide lifts all ships. But to answer your question directly,
thank you.
I'm on all platforms. So I have Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Those are kind of the core that you'll see me on. My podcast exists on traditional podcast players. I'm been recently kind of organizing some stuff with a company I'm helping scale. So mostly been kind of a bit of a lock-in period, as cringy as that sounds, but I'm coming back into content creation in the next weeks. Obviously, by the time this is coming out, I'll be pumping hard on all platforms. So it'll be good momentum. Awesome. But yeah, just expect to see more from me. I think I've realized in this past year around what we've discussed today, like, I need to participate in giving my gift, and to any degree that I haven't done that in the past, I genuinely, apologize, because it is selfish to hold that back from the world. And it's going to be a big year for all of us. I can't wait to ride across the step with you guys in person. It's going to be a profound journey, and I'll try my best to document that. On my channel, you'll see kind of different verticals. I kind of just do talking heads where I kind of flow of consciousness, talk about ideas. I have my podcast. I think I'm going to dabble in streaming as well, just to play around with that this year.
Dane and I just did last week, and it was incredible. You got to jump on that.
Yeah, I think it'll be super cool to like just build the depth and let people hang out and ask ideas. And then the final thing, of course, is like I've been pseudo documenting my life through the vlog series. I think it's not to gain any sort of traction, but I think just like having those logs and
visual diary,
that adventure we're going to have in August is going to be incredible. So super excited.
Seriously.
Please message me on all platforms. I'm currently, and this, God willing, won't be the case forever, but I'm currently small enough that I can still read and respond to literally every message that comes in. So like, this is the time to chat it up, and I'll have more offerings to come. Keep an eye on the Vitruvian universe, because as I am extremely bullish on real world versus fake world, excited to be building like some really cool projects from within our community and my kind of inner fraternity I have here.
Yeah. Do definitely message Zach if you are interested in anything that he has to offer or anything that he said on this podcast, because the potential connections that you can make, just like what we did when we were much, much smaller creators reaching out to each other, has reaped, I mean, I can't even, tremendous is like a small word for what the benefits that we've been able to reap from that. So go out into the world, do your thing, reach out to people that you want to reach out to, cultivate those communities. And yeah, we will see you guys at the top.
Thank you, Zach. It's a pleasure. We've spoken on the phone before, but it's great to see your face and have this amazing discussion. So thank you for coming on, and I look forward to what's coming from all three of us and many of our other compatriots in this space in the coming months, especially the month of August, named after Augustus,
yes.
The end of summer. It's, for anyone who made it this far, you're getting a little tease into some things we've been hinting at. So if you've made it through 2 hours and 12 minutes, you're
highly favored.
You're granted a gift. Yes. Yes. Awesome. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.
Hey, you guys. God bless.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.